to the point that we can get our monitoring and surveillance apparatus, so to speak, around it and be able to respond to it. And that's something that I believe continues to be necessary for us to be able to move forward with greater confidence. Not only here, given your leadership responsibility related to it, my support for that, but also within the community so that our residents can also understand what transmission looks like and what is possible in terms of their overall activities related to work, life, and play. To get us there, we've got things that we have to continue to not only gain expansion of in some sense, but also adoption. And one of the greatest components of that armor is our ability to detect and to detect very quickly. And with that, specifically testing, as I think will not come as a surprise to members of this committee and others participating in this conversation, is that we have worked, and I put the we in terms of serving and supporting those efforts to expand testing, to make testing available from a fixed site perspective, to also make it available from a mobility perspective. And what has become deeply disappointing and concerning is over the last few weeks, the dramatic decline in the overall consumption of the available testing within our community. And I don't know if that's a reflection of complacency or confidence or concern or fear or some combination of all of those factors that is causing individuals not to consume it, or if it's a matter of accessibility and availability, which I think we have improved on quite significantly, but still have a way to go. But what we do know is for us to be able to wrap our arms around this virus, we have to have consumption of the testing so that we can know where it is and know where it's spread. So that's one piece that I'll come back to. What we also recognize is that to do that, we have to continue to expand the testing in such a way that, going back to those pieces of accessibility and availability, so that it is the risk factors are known, people know when and how to get tested, and that they can see that it's in reach. We've made significant improvements in the turnaround times. Moving away from federal testing was a big part of that. We've done that. We still continue to be hampered in some of this expansion in satellite sites and neighborhood testing to be able to deploy it more strategically based upon supplies and capacity and some of these other factors. So there are some other dynamics. But we have to do everything that we can to promote the consumption of the testing and to continue to determine how to deliver more of it. We also are still hampered by limited data on contact tracing. What I've heard anecdotally is that contact tracing continues to improve, but we're still looking for that data to confirm. As of this morning, I made additional requests for that data so that we could better understand that and see where it's spreading as well. And so those are pieces, and I'll go back to what we know has helped us to at least to drive some of the spread down, is that the continued adherence to personal behaviors and precautions and these mitigating measures, physical distancing, hand hygiene, as well as the wearing of face coverings and masks. So I'll pause there and kind of encapsulate this to say that we are still very early on in terms of managing and responding to this virus. We have got to collectively as a community continue to do everything possible to suppress this virus. That is going to be necessary for us to be able to not only reopen our schools, but to keep our students in schools, to not only reopen our economy, but to progressively reopen our economy and maintain it, and to also continue to increase confidence and trust across our community that we're doing what's necessary now, and we can continue to do what's necessary as we move into the flu season and some of these other respiratory infections. With that, my call is, and Councilmember Gates mentioned the alliance that we have. There are about 60 individuals who are convened there who are representing various aspects of our community. I've appreciated very much not only the active engagement, but also the involvement and what I believe to be the increased coordination. But a piece of that we've been talking about most recently is a very concerted campaign around this to increase our communication and outreach, as I think Council Member Thomas can speak to. We've taken parts of that on in specific zip codes, 75211, 75216, and are seeing increased awareness, engagement there as well. We need to do more of that. We need to expand on that outreach. I still continue to believe that we need to have a very kind of small, coordinated team around this that's driving this every day. We're still very much in the middle of a crisis, and with numbers that we believe are still somewhere around 400 cases a day, that is not low enough. That is not suppressed enough for our contact tracing to come fully in effect, and for us to be able to have targeted interventions that are required for us to move to some of the next stages of how we manage this as well. So with that, I'll pause. I know that's quite a few comments. I'm hoping that generates additional questions and discussion as well. So thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Doc, for that. No, Rocky had reached out to me earlier, even though I didn't have him on the agenda. He definitely wanted to give an update with testing. Rocky, you on the line?
Yes, Chair Thomas, thank you for indulging my request to give a brief update to the committee and everybody else listening on where we are testing. And as Dr. Baggett mentioned, in fact, he and I had a very long conversation yesterday and hope to have another one this afternoon around the whole testing. So we right now, as he said, we have capacity of up to 3,000 tests per day. Our three drive-through sites, the two walk-up, and the mobile site. And it's very disturbing, as Dr. Baggett mentioned, the last 8 to 10 days, we have seen a dramatic drop in the need or in the consumption of testing. We're doing less than 30%. So we do have, so that again, begs the question of, strategically placing these testing sites in neighborhood type of settings, and those will have to be mobile. And we do have a lot of challenges there. Number one is having vendors that can do those type of testing for us. In fact, we had a solicitation open and which closed on Monday. We have over 15 proposals that were submitted. We are looking through that process, and we are hoping that we'll be able to get at least 3 or 4 vendors that are able to provide us different types of services, be it at-home testing, be it mobile, go set up at a neighborhood and do testing, or it could be large drive-through sites, depending on, if this thing spikes up in the next 30, 40 days, we want to be ready. We are in the process of getting that done, having vendors under contract so we can quickly deploy them as needed. We are continuing to work with the state on a couple of sites that we have finalized in 75216 zip code. Again, the state is looking, and again, it is tough for us to make the case that we want more testing sites when the data shows that we're utilizing less than 30% of the testing. Now we are looking at different options on how we might be able to modify some of those testing sites where we could do a couple of days a week and move it around. So that becomes a little difficult logistically because these are fixed sites that require large tents and generators and air conditioning systems that are set up in the parking lot. But I just wanted to assure everybody that we are working through that process to see how we can adjust some of that. Secondly, we are also continuing to look at if the state can partner with us in opening up some of the other sites that are right now needed, that we cannot move one of our sites over there, if they can indulge us in kind of doing that for 3 or 4 weeks, and then as soon as we have additional vendors that we can get under contract, we can replace them with our vendors, and spend, and the city of Dallas and county have agreed to spend the money that is needed to get the testing done. So that's where we are in the big picture. But I also wanted to, a quick update is based on the need right now, the hotspots, based on the heat map that PCCI gave. We are going to be moving the testing site, that the walk-up site at Redbird Mall, over to the West Dallas 75212 zip code, the Goodwill, Los Barrios area out there. So the Redbird Mall site will close tonight. And just to give you some perspective, the last 8 days, we have seen an average of 25 people at that site. It really does not make fiscal or practical sense to keep that site open. We end up sometimes, some days, having more staff people, manning that site than we have actual people testing. So that's going to happen. We're going to shut down tonight, open up the new site on Monday. The second one is Sam Tasby Middle School in the Vickery Meadow area, which we have been operating for 2 months now. That site will close on Saturday because DISD has asked that we give that property back to them as they get ready to open up school. We are actively looking for an alternate site in the Vickery Meadow area. We know there's a need out there. So we're working through that, and we're hoping that there'll not be a large gap before we can, in time-wise, before we can open up the second site over there. That's my update. Thank you, Chairman Thomas, for letting me give this update.
Thank you very much. Before we go to Master Statistician, I got a couple of questions. Have we gotten the situation as relates to the testing from the state? Have we gotten that straightened out? I hear the governor had a press conference. Then we had council meeting during the governor's press conference, and he has said that it should be straightened out as of yesterday. But I just wanted to find out if that's the case or not.
So you're talking about the data that the state is releasing. Yes, so they actually moved on to a new system August 1. And so it's been, 10, 15 days, and they've been still working out the bugs. And we got that big spike on Sunday and a little bit more on Monday, Tuesday. So what they're saying is the next couple of days, they'll be able to catch up on all that backlog, and then we'll start getting the true numbers as reported by the labs.
Okay. And my next question is, in light of the fact that in the Metroplex, school will be opening in the next 2 weeks, and as we're seeing across the country, when schools are opening, people are testing positive. Are they forecasting an increase of testing as schools open, teachers being able to have access to testing, students being able to have access to testing?
I don't know how the schools, I know we have a question out to Dr. Hinojosa and Dr. Baggett had asked that, waiting to hear back. But what we have offered is, based on the excess capacity that we now have, we have said you're welcome to send your students, your teachers, your staff to any of our testing sites, and we will get you tested. The other thing I failed to mention is, Dr. Wong reached out, and we are talking about that, based on this low number of testing and the capacity that we have, we are considering opening it up to anybody age 5 and above, whether you're symptomatic or not symptomatic. We want you to come and get tested. So we are looking through that process, making sure that we have logistically looked through all of the issues that might or might not crop up, but we'll be rolling that out pretty soon, making that testing available to anybody who needs it, whether they're symptomatic or not.
Okay, excellent. If you gentlemen can stick around, I'm gonna go ahead and have Dr. Bray to come on and do his report, and then we'll open it up to the committee or any other council members to ask any of you 3 gentlemen a question. So Dr. Bray.
Thank you, Chairman Thomas. So we're all acutely aware of the big spike, so to speak, and we've been doing a little bit on our end to try and pull that apart. So, Dallas County had 5,000 some odd cases come through on Sunday, et cetera, et cetera. This has been, it's a breakdown in communications essentially, but it has highlighted for a lot of folks an interesting way that we do things. You go to your physician tests you, the results go to the state tells the county. When the state doesn't tell the county, the patient still got, on all of these, the patients still got their results back, but the county didn't get a chance to do any contact tracing. The other thing that is highlighted by this is a pattern that it's fairly common. The test positives get placed on the day in which the county was notified, which is fine when we're typically running between 4 and 10 days off. But here we're running somewhere between 30 and 60 days off on many of these, and they all lumped on Saturday. I was just on a call with PCCI. We're talking about what options we have for redistributing that pile of cases back across the original dates so that we can assess whether it really impacts anything or not. A friend of mine used to be at TI. She uses the phrase directionally correct, right? So we might put all those cases back where they belong and discover that all we did was shift the graph up a bit. But our increasing days were still increasing days, and decreasing days were still decreasing days. The other alternative is we do that and we discover we didn't actually peak when we thought we peaked. We peaked earlier or we peaked later. And that's going to be an important piece for us to understand, because we're looking at this to say, does masking make a difference? Do some of the different policies that we've put in place make a difference? Generally, right now, the answer is yes. We can see pivot points, but we now find out we're dealing with data that was somewhat incorrect. So the other thing that has happened is all of the metrics are askew right now, because we have one day that appears that we have, well, our new cases in the last 7 days have doubled from what they were the previous 7 days. Now, that's not real. That's an artifact, right? Our reproduction time has gone up. That's not real. That's an artifact. Our active case rates have gone up. That's not real. That's an artifact. It has highlighted, I think, not so much in Dallas County, but we're working with some schools in Collin County. You know, the Collin County judge has did a press release where he basically said, I don't trust any of the data that comes from the state, right? And we've kind of amplified this public sentiment that I can't trust the data. I don't know what's really going on. We've been working with Dr. Baggett and the coalition to really develop a consistent set of metrics that are reported in a consistent way, with a consistent voice over time. I think we've found in anything else that we've communicated metrics wise, that's what works, right? We talk about the stock market. Now, the experts on the stock market look at hundreds of different data points, but the general consumer talks about the Dow, the S&P, right, and the NASDAQ. These are 3 numbers that are reported consistently, and most people know how to interpret that. We've got to get there with COVID, and it's not just a Dallas number, as several of you are already aware. It's not just a Dallas County number. It's understanding regionally what we're doing. So we're excited to push forward. Unfortunately, the gas for this came from this major reporting issue. So that's the gist of it. The numbers, if you back out the big clumps of cases, we're not that different than we were last week. So we kind of still are treading water, but treading water at a very high level. And as Dr. Baggett pointed out, 400 new cases a day it exceeds our existing capacity to respond in a meaningful way, right? We're kind of constantly keeping our contact tracers underwater and trying to keep up. So that's our challenge. We're talking to, like I said, we're talking to a couple school districts around how data can help them make decisions. This is still very early in the conversation, but school districts are an excellent example of a big consumer of this data. And right now there's not a good product out there that helps them make decisions. So I don't have a bunch of numbers to show because the numbers are all over the board right now. And we're still waiting, by the way, on hospitalization data to come back in a format we can put into the dashboard. We're not too bad capacity-wise. We are high, but COVID hospitalizations have been going down. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Chair, I have a
Thank
few
you very much
questions.
for that information. Go ahead, Jennifer. I was coming to you first.
Thank you. So Tim, have you gotten any idea when these backlog of numbers are going to, I guess, get them all reported? And so we
I
won't
heard
continue to
that.
see them in the daily. Yeah.
Yeah, I heard that they were shooting to get it all wrapped up this week, and so we should see these things move back to normal. The other piece is, and I've made this argument, we need to get that data put back on the right days.
Right.
That's probably going to take some additional time, but we should see the trickle in stop sometime this week.
Okay, and that was my follow-up question. Then are you going to put this new data and put it back on the days where it really belongs so we can see what the true trends are?
Yeah, that's our intent. I mean, the challenge is this data actually belongs to Dallas County Health and Human Services, right? So, I'm not sitting on raw data that we could just do this analysis for them. There is an interest, and I know Judge Jenkins has already expressed an interest in getting this done. So I'm having some ongoing conversations with PCCI about what it's going to take to do this. But it is on everybody's radar screen. The bigger picture is all of the national sites like the Johns Hopkins site, they get their data by scraping Dallas County's press releases. Well, Dallas County's got a press release that says 5,300 cases. So we're going to work around the back door with Johns Hopkins and probably some others around getting this data updated once we get the updates done locally.
Okay, and then the presumptive cases now that they're reporting, the Dallas County is reporting, are we charting those in graphs, or how is that?
We're not because we pull the data from the national aggregator so that we can talk about more than just Dallas County. Not every county is reporting those presumptives. In Texas, the presumptives are not in the confirmed case counts that are being posted. That is sort of on the list of things we want to get to, is begin bringing that data in locally for a different dashboard that we can start looking at that.
So, I think the question about, are we really comparing apples to apples? Like, are other places combining the confirmed and presumptive and reporting that as their total case count?
Yeah, some states are, and it's a state by state decision. One of the other things that we're looking into is, one of the things that's happening in order to get results in the hand of patients more quickly. I've heard that several of the prompt care type places have switched over to the antibody tests, and those tests count as presumptive positives, which means they're not going into the state's numbers the same way. I don't know if that's had an impact on our decreasing positives or not. That's one of the reasons we want to get to, at least locally, lumping this data together to see what we're actually looking at.
Yeah, I don't know how to address it properly, but I'm kind of with the Collin County. It's just hard to really understand like where we're truly at. Because if you add the presumptives with even the current actives, and take out the ones that they're just the old reports, we potentially are still relatively high. So it's hard to really gauge where we're at in a community spread.
The message that I think we need to stay on top of, and I've said this to others, it doesn't matter what the website says. If I'm standing next to somebody who has COVID and we're not practicing vigilantly on social distancing, washing hands, etc., then I'm going to catch it, regardless of what's on the website.
Right. Obviously, the risk is still relevant for everybody, and potentially, we're assuming that if you have, that everybody's susceptible, unless you have recently had it, and then you have antibodies and have some built-up resistance. But yeah, the activity-wise, I think is what you have to presume is people need to continue, obviously, practicing, the non-pharmaceutical, 6 feet apart, wearing masks, hand washing. But I have a lot of concerns now going into big changes related to kids going back to school, how that's going to affect our case count. So, all right. Okay. Well, thank you.
All right. Next, Councilmember Blue.
You got me?
Yeah, we got you, buddy.
All right, Mr. Thomas, I appreciate that. You know, I kind of have gone back and forth. I love Dr. Bray's presentations because I like numbers, and I think the numbers are getting better. I also like the idea of actionable data, and I just, outside of some of the masking and distancing and things that we've been talking about for months now, I'm still not to a point where I see we have a lot of actionable data. So, yeah, I don't have any great comments today. I always appreciate updates. I keep waiting for some silver bullet that's going to tell us how the story ends. I don't have it yet. We don't have it yet. So, as always, I appreciate the data, and that's all I've got. Thank you.
We need to come to you early and more often, buddy. Appreciate you.
You don't like where I went today?
Hey, your timing was perfect. It was absolutely perfect.
It was perfect. Did I have more than a couple minutes? Are you going to give me 10 minutes today?
Absolutely not. Councilmember
Absolutely,
Mendelson.
I agree with that decision. Thank you.
Mendelson.
Yep, you're on.
Oh, thank you. So I just want to start with asking about, there's a lot of discussion about moving around testing sites as if the issue is the inability for people to get to a testing site. And I certainly think it's a component, but I haven't heard a lot of discussion about changing the hours, meaning being open in the evenings or on the weekends. Has there been consideration about that?
Ms. Mendelson, this is Rocky. Yes, we are talking to our vendors, which right now is Parkland Hospital, and also to the state to see if we can make some of those adjustments. We certainly are talking about that. Hopefully, I have an update in the next couple of days.
Thank you. Can either of you share with us what the rate of false positives or false negatives is at this point?
This is Dr. Bray. I don't have that number. I can look and see nationally what we know, but I don't have that data at the Dallas level to be able to talk about that.
And I don't have that either, but I will follow up with Dr. Wong because it's HIPAA protected. We don't, the city does not get it. It goes to the health authority, but I'll certainly ask that question and provide the answer to you.
Well, I do think that there are a number of people who are not getting tested because they have lost confidence in the testing and in the data that comes with it, but also in their own results. Because anecdotally, there's so many stories of people who say, oh, I actually lost the ability to taste and smell, but yet I tested negative, which probably is not true. Or the other way around, where they tested positive, received results having been positive, but actually never took the test. So I think it has really affected people's confidence in pursuing it. The next thing I want to ask about is sort of a true or false question about, is it true that somebody who is 90 years old and dies of lung cancer, who's clearly going to have had breathing problems, could be tested and listed as COVID presumptive without ever having taken a test? And they're showing up in our data as having had COVID. Is that true?
So again, I would leave that to the medical doctors. I know that we differentiate between cause of death and other conditions that are present, and I don't know enough about how we're recording in Dallas County to speak to that. I can ask that question.
So I think that contributing causes to death are actually being counted as COVID positive, even though they've never had a test. And when you talk about somebody who's 90 with lung cancer, they're not dying from COVID. They're dying because they're 90 and they have lung cancer. And that would, it doesn't mean they couldn't have had COVID, but the question is, are they being tested and is that actually the reason? But I do love your example, Dr. Bray, and thank you for that about what matters is who's standing next to you and that they are appropriately social distancing and all those things. And I agree with you, and I think it's important. And I have to say that, you know, when Judge Hill's very vocal comments about the integrity of the data and confidence in it came out, you know, I think it became very political. But the truth is, you know, you yourself has said metrics are askew, not real as an artifact, not sure when the peak was, not a good product. The numbers are all over the board. I mean, you're a man of data and you're saying that. And so I have to tell you that, you know, what he's saying is not wrong. Like, there's reasons people should be thoughtful
Right.
in information they accept. And it's also why it's so important what you do is in fact documented properly.
So here's one of the challenges, and I used the term earlier this week because we've heard of the dark figure of crime, right? You know, we have a bias in the West that as soon as a number is placed on something, that number is the absolute gospel truth. And we thought about that with crime rates, and in the 1970s, we did the National Crime Victimization Survey and found out less than half of sexual assaults were reported to the police. We have had a dark figure of COVID since we began. We have patients who are asymptomatic, never got tested. We know that they're out there, but they're not in the data. What we found essentially in this experience is another source of error in the data, right? But it's not as though the data were ever 100% factually accurate all the time, no matter what. And so I think there is and always should be a healthy skepticism about the data, but it being off plus or minus 1 or 2% once we get it all straightened out isn't necessarily to disparage the whole system and say nobody knows what they're talking about and you know, we should just not worry about it. And I don't know that that's necessarily the message that went out, but people hear some of those comments and it sort of reinforces this none of this matters anyway attitude, and that's the part that's dangerous.
I agree with you, and I also agree with you about how people look at data. And so whether we're talking about the point in time count for homelessness that is significantly undercounting our homeless, or we're talking about the often repeated number in Dallas of 20,000 units of affordable housing needed, which came from a room that I was in that we mathematically figured out that number about 7 years ago, and people still say we need 20,000 when it was a long time ago and it was based on real data at the time, but it's not a number that is meaningful anymore. So I agree with you about all of those things. My next question is actually about the contract tracing. Can you tell me what % of the cases that are positive have had any amount of contract tracing done?
Yeah, so I'm hoping Dr. Baggett can speak to that. I have not seen the contact tracing data, so I don't know what's getting done. I've heard there's a standard out there that, and I'd have to find out where it's published, but you know, north of 200 a day, we can't catch up with. So I've heard it anecdotally. I don't have the data behind that.
I can quickly say as I think I mentioned earlier is that while I've seen some glimpses of the data, I haven't gotten the data and made that request again earlier this morning so we could get fuller data. And Dr. Bray and I talked about that earlier as well. The number that I've continued to go to is 192, which was the number that the county modeled their increased request for contact tracers and the new technology around in terms of their ability to then do it at full capacity. What we do know is that they were supposed to have a staff of 260 persons, and they are, at least not as of last week, at 260 persons. So what I've said is the number needs to be closer to somewhere closer to probably 150 based upon the limited information that I have for them to be able to fully contact trace. So what I've asked for very simply is what you just said, which is of the cases that are confirmed positive and reported, which all of them should be, but we know not 100% are, confirmed and reported, what percentage of those, how many potential contacts, close contacts, are they reporting? The data that I've been giving verbally is they're reporting somewhere around 5 contacts for each confirmed positive case. Then I've asked of those, how many are reached? And I haven't gotten that number. What I've gotten is the next set of data, at least verbally, which is of those contacted, what percent are responding? And that's been somewhere around 30 to 40%. But again, we don't have a good denominator to know if you contacted 2 of the 5 or what number of the 5 who may have been close contacts. We just know of those who were reached that 40% of them are responding. So 30 to 40% are responding. So my hope is that we'll get that data today. I requested it from PCCI and from Dallas County Health and Human Services so that we could get a better handle of what's going on there. We cannot sufficiently monitor and put surveillance around this, as you know, if we can't get contact tracing, and we really can't move forward with the degree of confidence and control that we need around this as much as you can get without having that in place.
Well, thank you for that. And I think it's a very clear explanation, but what I keep hearing at these sessions is that we're not getting the data from the county that we need. And that is very troubling. And I just want to reiterate that I'm very troubled with our partnership with Dallas County for our medical services. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Mendelson. Next, Councilmember Atkins.
I don't have any question at this time.
All right. Councilmember Narvaez, let me see if he's with us.
Pass.
All right. Very good. Councilmember Resendez.
Pass as well.
All right. Anyone else, round 2?
I'll jump back in for a minute, Mr. Thomas.
All right, literally a minute. You're on.
Not my clock yet. Since Ms. Mendelson went down this path, I'll echo some of that. I've talked for a long time about data that I found important. This viral outbreak, we started out with imperfect data, to say the least, and we've been waiting now for months to get better data. And it is a little disconcerting that here we are 6 months into this thing, and we still don't have very clean data. And for me, data doesn't matter that much. It's actionable data. And so we're still talking about, like I said earlier, masks and distancing. And I'm looking at the end game, which means school and how we're going to manage all this. And from business school, they used to talk about analysis paralysis. And what I'm doing is I keep talking about case mortality rates and infection fatality rates. And we're not getting the straight truth on what the denominators are because we don't know. So we're still talking about data when it's time to get into risk management. It's time to make decisions on how we're going to manage things, how we're going to open things up, how we're going to live with this. So I appreciate the data. I do appreciate the updates. And I appreciate the candor today that we just don't know a lot of things still. We're not sure of some of the data. I find that very helpful to hear. Whether you have good data or bad data, we need those answers. So yeah, I've moved on to the idea of risk mitigation, of how to live with this. So I'm looking for actionable data. I'm looking for decisions we can make on the imperfect data that we have today so that we can actually get our economy, get our schools, get our life going forward again. That's my comment, and I will wrap it up right there. So thank you, Mr. Thomas. Thank you, Dr. Bray, Dr. Baggett.
All right, very good. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for your hard work on this. Thank you for our regular updates on this. If there's any information you need to share with me that I need to share with the full council or the committee members between this meeting and our next meeting in 2 weeks, feel free to give me a call and let me know. Next up is Mr. Randall White.
Hello. Thank you, Chairman Thomas, Council members Atkins, Blewett, Gates, Mendelson, Navarez, and Resendez. Appreciate the opportunity. Appreciate to be here with you. I have some slides. Don't know what the mechanism is. Oh, here we go. Terrific. And I'll just, Gabrielle, I'll just say next slide when it's time. In May, Councilmember Adam Bazaldua, with recommendations from full council, assembled a team, an advisory committee of restaurant and hospitality folks. It expanded some and began to include the arts and special events and tourism. And our objective was to provide council with recommendations and best practices for reopening, for the reopening phase after the coronavirus pandemic, and to kind of be a collective industry voice for most proposed ideas as we move forward. Next slide. Just so you understand some terminology I present, I refer a lot to Dallas's sociable economy, and that includes restaurants, hotels, bars, clubs, arts, cultural organizations, festivals, food trucks, music venues, tourism, more. And this is the part of our economy. It's not just entertainment, and it's not just fun and games. It's the jobs and the businesses and the business owners and that part of our economy that took the pandemic arrow directly to the heart. We were the first to be affected. Much of these sectors will be the last to open back up. And when we do open back up, they'll be just inexplicably changed from how they were pre-COVID. I also asked staff to present and include in a packet to you what our empty chairs report. It contains 59 asks of the city from our sociable economies, economic engines, survival, stabilization, and recovery. I'll review just some of those. These were pounded out over a course of 2 months by 20 people, many of whom you all nominated to be a part of this little special task force. And I'm just going to highlight some of these things. You will note that most of them are not about money. Most of them are not saying, hey, like the city of Boston or wherever, we're asking for 2.7 million or this kind of thing. Most of these asks are simple little things that the city can do to help us get our feet back under ourselves. We do know that the arts industry in Dallas is a $34 million operation. We do know that there are 20,000 jobs in the restaurant industry. We do know, before COVID, we do know that nationally that the restaurant industry has taken a $25 billion hit, and this could affect as many as 3 million jobs nationwide. We do not have that broken down to the local level. We hear that as many as 70% of restaurants will close permanently as a result of COVID. And we also hear that as many as half of all hotels will be forced to close because they're not going to be able to keep up with their financial obligations. So I'm just going to go through this, and you're going to see in the handout you have, and I'll highlight a few of the things from this report from the various people that were at our table. Simple things that the city can do, some things that are not so simple. If we can go to the next slide. We had our food truck friends with us at the table, and they came up with 4 asks, including this one, which was really kind of very smart. Our food trucks have to get permits from every single municipality in which they work. And one way they can save money and help be able to continue to provide food trucks in the city of Dallas is if some type of interlocal agreement could be formed between all of the municipalities in North Texas, and that if the city of Dallas could help take that lead and help establish that the food trucks folks have one-stop shopping for food permitting and for their fire permitting that they need, and health permitting, that it would make it so much easier for those small mom and pop owned businesses to survive and continue to feed the whole economy of North Texas. And that is one sample of one ask from the food trucks of 4 that they put in our packet. Next slide. From the restaurants and bars and music venues, we had many people at the table here on this. There were 24 asks that they came up with, including 5 that I'm going to present to you as an example. One was, it is so confusing. It has been so confusing, and I understand here, listening to the frustrations of even communicating with the county and the federal sources, but it has been so confusing is what the guidelines are today. And they seem to shift and change, and it depends on this executive order over there or that executive order there. One of the things the city could do to help, particularly the restaurants, bars, and music venues, is if there was a one-stop place again where we could go and the city helped make that happen, that provided everybody the information they need today. Next slide. Another request that this part of our group asked was for a pilot program for restaurants, bars, and other businesses in sociable districts to begin to be able to offer food and services in more of the public right-of-way on weekends or special dates. We're already doing the parklets. Let's go ahead and move forward and expand into that more outside space, more public realm space for food service and bar service. Work with us and try and help to do that, because as we move from outside of the interior into the open air where it is actually safer for our customers to dine. There are models already happening around the United States of cities that are doing this. They're saying this side street will be closed on weekends and it'll be made one big cafe. Next slide. Another request that was made was, I know we have a variety of districts in the city of Dallas. Some of them are driven by their funding source. PIDs, et cetera, the hot tax or transit-oriented type things. Some of the cities we're modeling around the globe actually are creating sociable districts, areas in which we test drive various different approaches to making those areas more walkable, encouraging more private investment, promoting more multimodal transportation links, ways we can incubate new ideas for interacting, for safety, for sanitation, and better integrate some of our arts and cultural programs into those sociable districts. We have some ideas and some recommendations for that. We would love to see something like that pursued. Next slide. We request a pilot program. This is actually one of the few things that had some dollars tied to it. In Arlington, Virginia, there's the Arlington Restaurant Initiative is doing very smart, very clever allocation of their policing funds and resources, along with sanitation and other resources to make those sociable districts in that city safer, more attractive, drawing more customers, spending more dollars, contributing more to the tax base of the city of Dallas. We'd like to see an experiment, a test drive of modeling after the Arlington, Virginia Restaurant Initiative in the city of Dallas. If we're going to look at ways to allocate funding for public safety, but do things in a new way that keep maintaining and building our safety, our customer safety, and our business owner safety, it's something worth considering. Next slide. One of the other requests from the restaurants and bars and music venues was that we expedite building permits and approvals during the COVID-19 pandemic and eliminate all associated fast track fees right now. Somebody can open a new restaurant and pay extra to fast track it. How about during the pandemic? We just kind of waive that, saying more businesses are needed right now to contribute to our bottom line, and we will waive that fast track fee and make it possible for that to happen. Next slide. Our special events and festivals that had a place at the table, they asked 5 asks. They had 5 asks, including this one, but the rest of their asks are included in the handout you should have. This was their number 1 ask, to waive special event permit fees for 2020 and the rest of 2021. Let's get people back out and celebrating, but the permit it is help them make the funds they need in order to do the minimum in terms of special events. And one way that we can do that is by waiving special event fees through the duration of the pandemic. Next slide, please. In the tourism sector, there were 4 asks. The tourism folks mostly saw them as themselves as a wait and see. We don't know yet. We don't know how this is going to affect us. We don't know what asks to make of the city, but they did zero in on 4, including this one that they indicated was a priority. Currently, as stimulus funds and job funds come through, and particularly also in terms of bond sales and items, everything that we can expedite, urgently address that, move it up. If there are going to be some bond funds for building work that are going to be delayed because of the pandemic, people want to know. They want to be able to expand some opportunities that are facility based and improving the facilities, and make sure that the jobs associated that will also help kind of stimulate the local economic impact in whatever part of the city that this is in. So they also want to be able to move forward on some of these projects so that they can further engage public-private partnerships. So that was one of the things for our tourism venues that came a lot from our friends at Fair Park. Next slide, please. Arts and culture. You've heard a lot from the arts and cultural community about the economic impact there. They came up with 12 asks, including these 3 that I will just pull out as an example. Additional COVID funding. We saw yesterday that the Federal CARES Act funds is about $1 million is going to come through. You all signed off on to help in terms of the preparing buildings for public access in terms of being biologically safe. We're asking for more of that. As more funding comes through, these organizations are hurting. Their employees and the artists that are affiliated with them are hurting. So please, as more surfaces, more opportunities surface, particularly for the arts and cultural sector, please pursue these. It will be good for the soul of our city as well as for an entire economy. Next slide, please. Advocate for and help redirect available infrastructure and COVID relief funding to provide resources to pay for COVID-related protections. This is what happened yesterday. I learned about that after the slide was presented. And to make sure that as opportunities come up and you find yourself with COVID funding, I doubt this is happening, but don't return any money. Please do not return any money to the federal government. See how we can use it in terms of infrastructure needs and facility needs in our arts and cultural community. Next slide, please. This was a priority as well, and it's an annual budgeting priority. And all indications so far I'm hearing are very good and very encouraging, but please be strategic about your regular budget cuts. Please try not to balance the City of Dallas budget on the backs of the arts and parks and libraries. We just thought we'd sneak that one in there. Next slide, please. Defer code enforcement. This is from our hotel friends. Defer code enforcement on issues that require capital improvements. Our hotels are struggling mightily, as you can imagine, without the conventions and tourists coming to town. We have many grand, beautiful hotels and their entire employee base that are idling. And anything we can do to defer code enforcement on certain things that would require great outlay of funds right now. For example, we heard of one hotel that if they could just defer the enforcement of needing to put reflective tape on their emergency exit stairwells, it's a new thing that has surfaced, but it's a requirement. If that can just be deferred until the end of the pandemic, that hotel alone would save nearly $1 million. That's $1 million that will help them make loan payments and in payroll. Next slide, please. There are multiple requests in the hotel section. I just kind of lumped them all into multiple requests on the slide that all had to do with helping the hotels maintain their cash flow and preserve their cash flow. There are a lot of little different ways that the city can do certain things that don't have to do with spending money, but might have to do with not accepting funds yet. That will help the hotels. Right now, they're in deep, dire emergency. Next slide, please. This was another request that kind of goes hand in glove with yesterday's approval for the biological improvements for our arts and cultural facilities. There is a global initiative out of ISSA called the GBAC Star Facility Accreditation Program. We'd like to encourage more of our organizations and our businesses and our facilities to adopt this program, and anything the city can do to reinforce that will be helpful. It basically says this building, this business meets these standards and it's safe to come back here. This is about a business customer development and assuredness on behalf of customers to our hotels and restaurants and arts venues. It's a certification, a brand that says, they've met all the high standards of being safe for me. And anything the city can do to help promote that and advocate that for our hotels and our other kinds of facilities would be very helpful. Next slide, please. That's just a quick summary of the 59 asks in this document. Anybody who's watching, who's not a part of this committee meeting, can actually go to 24hourdallas.org, download this document from that site. What we're hoping, Chairman, is that each of these items almost could get tagged to a various department and said directed by you all saying, check this out. See if there's something we can do there. This will help this part of our economy. What can we do here? And I'd like to almost keep a checklist on behalf of our 20 volunteers who, along with me, volunteered to help develop this document and come up with these asks of you. I thank you so much for your time, and that's my presentation.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Randall. Thank you for all your hard work.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
This is Councilmember Narvaez. If I may have, as soon as you're done, if I could have a minute to go, because like I told you, I have to get off to go to another appointment. But I had a couple of comments from what we saw in there. So just when I can have a second.
I'll go to you first. I just got one quick question for Randall. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for your leadership on that. Quick question. Has there been any communication between your task force and the governor's office? I know you've had entities like Billy Bob's that's, kind of reconfigured things to be able to go from a club to a restaurant. Has there been any conversations with the governor's office about the timeline as far as bars reopening or any kind of changes that could be made to allow some of the facilities that are part of your group to open?
We have our task force has not, some of the professional associations associated with some of the members of our task force have. The hotels, the restaurants, the state organizations have sat down and are even on the mayor's task force to address some of those things. They're pressing forward as fast as they can. We're seeing some of the local businesses, like you said, Billy Bob's in Fort Worth, modifying their menu operations so they can suddenly be classified as a restaurant rather than a bar. It's a way for them to just survive. But we're not getting any new information out of the state about what's really coming this direction.
Got it. Councilmember Narvaez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. And thank you to my colleagues for letting me go first so I can get to my next meeting. And there was a recommendation about not having code enforcement go into hotels. I will be opposed to that recommendation simply because in District 6, I represent a huge portion of the hotel industry in the city. And I can tell you all, as my colleagues, that we get countless calls for code issues and code violations at hotels that try to sneak away and sneak through by not having to keep up to code. And it's constantly happening for all various different types of reasons. So because of that, in my experience, I wouldn't be able to support that. As far as promoting hotels, I think we already do that through a fund through our hot tax, and that's called Visit Dallas. We give Visit Dallas millions upon millions upon millions upon millions upon millions of dollars in order to promote hotels and what they're doing and the industry itself. And so for me, I think the city of Dallas is already doing that from the countless millions of dollars that we are giving to Visit Dallas in order to promote. So if these hotels are getting these accreditations, yay. And I'm excited for them and I want them to do that. But I think that that's Visit Dallas's job to do that and not the city of Dallas. The other recommendation that came through, I think is a good one, is a one-stop shop for the restaurant businesses, the restaurants, bars, entertainment venues to have so that they can go to one place to know what all the regulations are. I think that's an excellent idea. and something that I would like to see, if either it's us or is it the county that would do that, so that the restaurants inside of the city would have a place to go, or if it's a county effort that we can be a part of with the county, could make that happen. I think that's a wise idea, but to do it for the entire North Texas region, I don't think that that's a good idea. Other than that, I appreciate all the work that everybody put into working together. I will continue to look through these recommendations, but I just wanted to make sure that I got that those points across before I had to get off. Thank you again to the presenter. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for having this and for giving me a few seconds to go first. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Hey, you're welcome. Randall, do you have any response to? Okay, great. Councilmember Atkins, Chair of our Economic Development Committee, I want you to go ahead and go.
Thank you. Chairman Narvaez kind of, answered most of my question pertaining to that, the high tax and in the business of dollars. But I do like that one-stop shop. But I'm kind of confused. If we do a one-stop shop, how would that work and how will you manage that? I mean, do you have to set up a staff, a location? Who will be in charge of that?
It could all be on the web. We just need one place to go where everybody knows what are the rules, what are the guidelines today for the various industries, and it does require some coordination. I'm hearing there are coordination breakdowns between the city and the county, and I know that there are breakdowns between the city and the state. But if it almost would, it could all be on the web. It's not a virtual place. I mean, it'd be a virtual place rather than a physical place.
Chairman Thomas, question to you, Chairman Thomas. Number one, COVID-19 with the current act, and we do have money to educate the business and the community about, restaurant, what's going on. Is this something the current act, the funding, could set up a website to someone go to this web to get information, just like we do on our website with the city of Dallas? Is that would go under the current act of funding? Is that a line item?
That's a good question. I'm gonna defer to Kim. I know Kim's on the line because she's doing the presentation next. Kim, can you address that?
I'm sorry, Councilmember Atkins, will you repeat the question, please? And I'll do my best to address it.
Kim, this is John. If you would like me to, I can tell you that I'm not aware of any CARES Act funding being spent directly for that purpose at the moment, but it is certainly something I think would be within our purview. I know that the Code Enforcement Department, for example, has developed materials to provide that level of education that they hand out when they make their visits. We can certainly go the next step and ensure that if there's any additional educational materials that we want to put together and make it available on our website, we can do so. And so, I just wanted to offer that, and that other people can also go to our website, dallascityhall.com/COVID-19, where we have kind of a one-stop shop that allows and provides those resources for folks. So if that's not enough information that we have currently, we can certainly expand that.
And John, I thank you for that explanation. But John, let me not debate you, but I think that restaurant and people and the citizen, this is part of COVID-19. Our cold people do visit these restaurants and these hotels and everything is part of that. I can't say it's a separate issue, but I think that if we got a website set up, I think they could be merged together. So I think it is, but I think we should look into it and see how can we merge it together, because this is something that bring us sales tax to the city of Dallas, keep the business open in the city of Dallas, and keep people working. So I think it work out. So I would prefer to have something in writing about our next meeting case, Chairman Thomas, to say how can we resolve this issue. I think what we're trying to do today, and Chairman Thomas trying to do, is this is information. How we gather information and come up with a solution. Let us find a solution, not say, okay, I don't think it is. If it can be done, it can be done. It cannot be done. Let's have a solution, because I think this committee is here to bring in solution, solving solution right today. It's kind of like Councilman Blewett said, hey, we got all this data, but we still got to live. We still got to live. We still got to go forward. We can't stay in the house in a bubble. We can't live underneath the sea. Hey, we got to have solution today and follow it out. I'm not debating you, Mr. Fortune, but let us try to find solutions that this is ideal, but how can we actually implement this idea with the website we already got up?
Well, I agree, Councilmember. I was agreeing with you.
Councilmember Atkins, John and I will work together and be prepared to provide an update back to the committee.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Atkins. Councilmember Resendez.
I don't have any additional questions. I just want to thank Mr. White for this information and for these suggestions.
Excellent. Councilmember Blewett.
Yes, sir, Mr. Thomas, I appreciate. I want to go back to what Mr. Atkins talked about. We have been given, or the federal government has given entities like the Dallas-Fort Worth Airport a variety of CARES Act funding to help them with their employees to minimize furloughs and some of their costs. And I would suggest that the service industry has not been included in a way that perhaps the money that was given to the city of Dallas could help facilitate. Now, in my district, I have obviously a lot of restaurants, a lot of bars, a lot of owners, and a lot of employees. It's going to be a big impact on the future of Dallas in the uptown, downtown, entertainment areas, arts districts. All of these areas are impacted just as much as the DFW airport was in terms of a lack of traffic.
Thank you.
And the difference is the airport was able to keep their employees paid, and these individual businesses are not able to do that largely. Some have done it. Some have actually gone deep into their pockets to keep their employees, but we're talking 5-6 months now. I mean, when we first did our economic shutdown, it was supposed to be a 3 to 6 week shutdown to figure out what was going on. We're now at 5 to 6 months. The numbers keep coming in, as Mr. Atkins talked about data. We keep getting data. We keep understanding a little bit more about this viral outbreak. Meanwhile, a lot of our businesses are withering. Now, some of these proposals, Mr. White, I definitely love these proposals. I think they're great. I wish we'd done them 5 months ago. We did not know it would last this long. We don't know how long it's going to last going forward. You and I both know, all of us know on this call, a lot of these changes would take a significant amount of time to move through. I mean, I was up in Colorado this summer. I saw Breckenridge and other towns that have shut down their main streets. They have put parklets out front. They have used their front porches and their sidewalks to have people out there outside safely distanced to be able to bring business to these entities. We have been slow. We haven't done it. We didn't know how long this would last. And now our businesses, our residents are in real trouble. I do think the CARES Act is an interesting way of approaching this. I think there is money that could be used. I appreciate Ms. Tolbert, Mr. Fortune, you guys saying you're going to look into how we can do that. Mr. White, in reference to a lot of your proposals, whether it's streamlining things, I wish I could wave a magic wand. I mean, these things are complex. We're nervous about making a knee-jerk reaction to something and causing other problems. But I am committed to trying to find a way to help. And I really appreciate your interest. I really appreciate your passion. I know you're doing everything you can to save and help this industry. I know you're nervous about what's happening and where we're headed. I am too. I think everybody on this call is. So I think we have a little bit of work to do in terms of understanding what we can do from your proposals. And I promise to be back in touch and help any way I can.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Councilmember Mendelson.
Thank you. I also want to just echo Councilmember Blewett and say, I think that this has been really good work, and I love all the really creative ideas you've had, and want to say how important I think our restaurants are, our entertainment venues, you know, how bittersweet that we were named #1 restaurant city for Savor, and then everything got shut down. But I also want to say that there's things in here we should have already been doing. There's things that we should do, and then there's some that I don't think we should do. So in no particular order, I'm going to say I agree with Councilmember Narvaez that code enforcement is urgent in this city. And even the example in the PowerPoint of deferring for reflective tape on a stairwell. I can only imagine what that means for safety for people. And as a person who has trouble managing stairs already, I need that reflective tape. And I think it's urgent. So I would not be in support of any less enforcement of code enforcement. We should have already shut down streets in this city. I think we all know that. I don't know why it hasn't happened, other than we haven't really had a venue to make it happen. And perhaps this committee is that venue. And so, Chairman Thomas, I would love you to help drive that, because I think it could be really transformative. We've talked so long about bike lanes in the city. We've all talked about in our budget how that funding has been pulled back in the proposed budget. And I think that we might need to say, no, this is important. It's important to quality of life. It's important to our environment, but it's also important to the recovery of these businesses. And I would love to be able to support that. The request about building permits, oh dear. Every single part of the city is screaming about building permits, and we've got a really big problem with how long it's taking to turn those around. And I think that I know I've heard multiple different constituent groups saying, but we should go first. You should prioritize ours. And kind of like all of our strategic planning items, when you prioritize everything, you've actually prioritized nothing. And so I don't want to prioritize building permits for this. I want to fix our permit process. And I don't want to fix it for COVID. I want to fix it for good. So that needs to happen. We for sure need to be able to support our arts and culture. And, you know, they are the heart and soul, I think, of Dallas. And so I definitely want to make sure that we look at the different ways we can do that. Hopefully our artists and our nonprofits did apply for CARES funding, and that will help sustain them. And of course, in our draft budget, we have, I think, kept a lot of that funding intact. So I'm happy about that. I have a question, Randall, about request 2 about the right-of-way for bars and restaurants. And I'm wondering if you think the Parklets has already addressed that, or if there's more you'd like to see and how you would like to see that.
Well, it goes to the point of what you're just talking about, taking over streets. It's just where are the guidelines now that we have a parklets established? Why can't a side street off of Lower Greenville, a side street on weekends, be closed down, and moving in more into the public right of way, making that a whole little mini restaurant cafe street? Why can't the same thing happen in North Dallas? Why can't the same thing happen in Bishop Arts on a weekend or a special day? And without it being such a special event permit-based kind of thing, it become a normal practice that on this day, we move into the streets like they're doing in New York and Boston and Chicago and Seattle and other places. And like you heard Mr. Blewett talking about, even in the mountain cities. So it's just that point. It's just the permission or the will or the ability to do that is what we need.
Well, I'd love to see that happen. And I think it's an easy thing for us to do if we could just get it together. The first ask, I think, is actually one of the most difficult, which is to say to sort of look at things in a regional way, because we all have different standards. And first of all, everybody's getting fees off of this, but there are also different levels of inspection required and information that's necessary. So I think it's actually it's a much bigger hurdle than it sounds like. And I would say to you with great affection, I think that's actually the role of an association. So, so I think your role is on your website to say, to get your permit for Dallas, click here. To get your permit for Arlington, click here. To get your permit for Plano, click here. And then same thing with the legislation. You know, we put out a dashboard, and it includes the legal language. And again, I would say as an association, you should be laying that out for all of your members, because what Dallas County, Collin County Institute may be different than what Tarrant County does. And so I think that's actually your point, your point of being, raison d'etre, right? So anyhow, those are my major comments, but
Thank
it's so
you.
important that we do focus on this. And I think we should accomplish some of these things for our business owners. And I really sincerely appreciate you bringing them forward.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Gates?
Thank you, Chair. My question would be is, so where do we go from here if we are in agreement that we want to look at some of these opportunities that have been raised by Mr. White? Are we going to take it to see if we can drop an ordinance or talk about it, or what's your plan for that, Mr. Thomas?
Actually, Councilmember Bazadou has been working hand in hand with Mr. White. Councilmember Bazadou, are you still on the line, on the call? I don't see him. I know he said he had a.
It does appear he's on the line. He's muted.
He may, he told me he had another meeting he was gonna kind of stick his head in. So what I'm gonna do is I'll get back with him. Maybe me, him, and Rondo will have a meeting in the next maybe week, and that way when we have our next meeting, staff will have had a chance to give an update on the concerns that were brought up by Councilmember Atkins, and we'll have a more full report. At that time, I defer to Councilmember.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I mean, these are, I don't know if there's going to be consensus for everything to try to move forward, or the or the ability for it, but there's definitely areas that I think we need to take a look at, and like the parklets. I mean, I think going into the fall, whatever we can do. I mean, I don't know if it needs to be a temporary while we're under these COVID circumstances at this point, and that gives us an opportunity to try it out and see how it works. But I know this is happening in other cities and other states, and I think we've got to help these restaurants stay alive during this period of time, and being flexible. I think it's a natural opportunity to be able to test it out. So I'm interested in trying to move that forward, and taking a look at the pros and advantages and see what else we can entertain as well. So thanks.
Excellent. Thanks for your feedback. We have any council members who are not on the committee who would like to make any comments? Gonna do it for round one. Any committee members want a round two, or any committee members who hadn't had a round one who wants to make a remark? All right. Well, Rhonda, I know you've, I want to thank you for your persistence. You were consistent about pushing to see when we could get this on the committee, and you have no idea. I was telling Councilman Bazadou how many different, potential COVID-related things I've been approached about, but I appreciate your persistence, and that's why we wanted to make sure we got you as soon as possible. You see the committee sees value in these recommendations, and it will not fall on deaf ears. We're going to see what we can do. As a matter of fact, go ahead and get with my assistant Chris, and let's see if we can set something up for me, you, and Councilman Bazadou next week to do a follow-up.
I will do that. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, council members, for the attention and time, and staff. I look forward to talking with you for.
Excellent. Appreciate it, Rhonda. Have a good day. Stay safe.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Next, Kim Tolbert, you're on.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair Thomas, and to the council members. Thank you for the opportunity to provide you with an update on our return to work plan. As you know, that we briefed our first rollout of the return to work plan back in June, on June the 3rd. A lot has happened, and we've continued to track and look at the trends as it relates to COVID-19. And so we're still in phase one. We have intentionally continued to look at the data to determine the feasibility of opening beyond the phase one. And so today we really just wanted to give you an update. We know we've had questions from several council members around kind of where we are as relates to some of the retrofitting of our city facilities that we talked about back in June. And so it's really, I believe, an opportunity for us just to kind of shed some additional light on where we are. We know that many of you either have children or you know of families with children that will either be working on their schoolwork in person or virtually. We know that that will present some additional challenges for our employees. Those that actually have children who have elected to keep their kids in a virtual environment will need to be able to work with their children so they can start out with this school year with as much success as we want all of them to have. So we want to eliminate any hardships as relates to our staff trying to juggle both and trying to figure out how to maintain their jobs during this time. So we're going to continue, as we stated back in June, to be flexible. We are continuing to ensure that our schedules, some are hybrid. We have some employees who are actually coming into the office certain days a week, and some are working at home. But we believe that we need to continue to move in that direction until the data tells us elsewise. So on the next slide, I'm just going to give you a brief overview of our presentation this afternoon. We will not take a lot of your time, but we do want to give you an opportunity to also ask us some questions about what we present today. I'll briefly review back over the timeline that we shared with the council back in June. I'll remind you of the guidelines that we have been utilizing to determine our opening strategy. I'll then address kind of where we are with that timeline, and then begin to talk about potentially phases 2 and phase 3 with some tentative dates. And I want to say tentative because we know that depending on where we are, those dates might change again. And then Eric Thompson, who's our Director of Building Services, is joining me this afternoon. Eric will give you a brief overview of our facility readiness to talk with you a little bit more about some of the things that we have been able to accomplish since June. And then we will close with next steps. So on the next slide, this is just a reminder of the timeline that we originally proposed, but this is kind of showing you some dates as we are today. We're looking to hopefully, depending on where we are after the Labor Day holiday, move into phase 2 of our reopening plan. That means that our departments where we have still close to 75% of the employees working in a virtual state, we would begin to look at how do we bring some of them back into facilities, yet continuing to keep in mind all of the requirements around social distancing, as well as all of the other employee responsibilities that we're asking our employees to assume, which is all of the safe hand washing, making sure that they're being mindful of the fact that this pandemic is not over. We have tentatively talked about a time frame when we might be able to start having council meetings back in the building. We do want to maintain some flexibility there as well. So we're going to be recommending a hybrid approach where we may have some council members in person starting out, and then some will continue in a virtual state until such time that the numbers get better. And with that, we'll continue to look at our timeline and look at our dates as we go into the holiday season and for the remainder of the year. On this next slide, please. So our guidelines have not changed. We presented this back in June. We've continued to look at a 14-day or try to see if we're at a 14-day decline, a steady decline consistently. And we've seen, as most of you know, we've seen certain days where the numbers were going down and then they spike and then they go down and they spike. So we have not gotten to 14 days consecutively where the numbers are going in a downward state. We've also continued to look at the hospital data that we know has been provided, and we know that there's testing going on throughout the community. Rocky Vaz and his team and under Mr. Fortune's leadership have continued to work with Dr. Baggett's team, as well as all of our external stakeholders, to ensure that the testing is happening in the community, and we're doing so in the best possible manners that we can provide. On the next slide, This is just a reminder of the strategic approach. I won't read any of this, but again, as I mentioned, the expectation that we have had throughout this process is that we need to make sure that we do not rush bringing our employees back into facilities, and we do believe that our new normal will continue to be staggered hybrid approach to where we will probably never have 100% of every single employee back in every single office. And so we continue to communicate with our employees around where we are, knowing that we definitely need to lead by example and ensure that we're providing the safest conditions possible for our staff. The next slide. So June 8th is when we really started the phase one. We have implemented all of the items that you see that we talked about doing in our phase one. We've been able to do a lot of on-the-go services, excuse me. We've been able to have all of our departments are operating. So there's not a department that's closed, but we're just providing different ways of delivering services. We know that boards and commission meetings have been able to continue in a virtual state, and City Hall, although it is open and we are conducting certain business out of the building, we do not have full staffing at this time. Phase two, this is just a reminder of some of the things that we were trying to move into phase two, which we're not there yet. But when we get to phase two, we will be looking at hopefully being at about a 50% on-site staffing, but that will require us to continue with staggered meetings, appointment onlys, making sure that we're not piling employees up into training sessions, but continuing to keep in mind where we are and some of the new things that we will have to do within our city facilities. During this phase, of course, the retrofitting of our city facilities has been key. A lot of work has gone on to prepare our buildings, and as I mentioned, Eric will come on shortly and be able to share a little bit more about that. Phase three, right now, again, this is a tentative date of September 22nd. We will continue to look at, as I mentioned, hybrid, staggered, abbreviated work schedules to give our employees the flexibility that we know that they're going to need as they're dealing with whether it's school and children, and trying to just make sure that those adjustments are being made. We also want to keep in mind that we may have situations where we have employees with underlying health conditions. We will be given priority attention to making sure that they stay in a status that is more conducive to meeting their needs and that continues to keep them safe. Next slide, please. So this is just to give you some indication of some of the things that we have been able to do in phase two. I think it's important for us to continue to remind our residents that we are open for business. And although we're doing things a little bit differently, we are providing opportunities to really get to service delivery options that we can be a little bit more direct, and some of the curbside and tele operations have really shown us that we can be flexible. And I know that our residents appreciate the fact that they've been able to still access services. The Dallas Animal Services team, as you'll see on the graphic on this page, they have been very flexible and very innovative during this time period. They've adjusted operations to minimize the spread while remaining both committed to both public safety and life saving. We have had a robust social media, I would say, presence throughout this our COVID response. Thank you to our communications, outreach, and marketing team under the direction of Catherine Quellar. They have done a great job in working with every single department to make sure that we're pushing out messaging to the community. During this time, DAS has had a 90.9% live release rate to date. So I just want to commend Ed Jamison and his team for their efforts and the continued services that have been provided during this time. Sherry Kowalski and her team in the controller's office, they have been operating remotely. Some staff, they've been coming into City Hall, city facilities as needed to make sure things, like processing payments and making sure that we're getting payments out to our vendors, that those things are still being done as timely as possible. They have moved successfully to a lot of electronic documents. I think is something that we needed to do anyway, and they've been successful in moving that forward. They have continued with the consolidation of all of our payroll functions. I mentioned this in our budget presentation on yesterday, that the integration of Workday and the combining of all of those efforts under one department has been a focus, and they've been able to move that forward during the pandemic. The majority of individuals that are coming in for our ITS department, they kind of fall into two groups, and I'll just share our Security Operations Center, as well as our Data Center and Network Operations team. Those individuals are maintaining systems and ensuring that they're smooth business operations. We know that cyber attacks and those things don't necessarily go away during times such as this, but they have done a great job of making sure that our systems and our vulnerabilities have been minimized. On the next slide, please. Budget. This is our budget season, and so our Office of Budget Management team under Jack Ireland's leadership, they've continued to work countless hours to make sure that the budget was precise, and just want to thank them that during this time when the majority of them are typically in cubicles working side by side, they've been able to deliver budget to us, and it has been because of their ability to be flexible, working with staggered schedules, continuing to elevate all of the different systems that they've needed in order to pull the budget together. So thank you for Jack and his team. Our Economic Development Department, they've continued to work to meet the needs of our residents, as well as our developing community. Online programs and services have been provided. And again, we would want to just remind residents that if there are needs to have in-person meetings, to make those requests, and we are definitely doing appointments and scheduling those to make sure that they're happening where we're able to space out within the various departments. The Office of Environmental Quality and Sustainability, they've continued all of their air and stormwater inspections. We mentioned this back in June because we definitely did not want to have any essential services to slow down, and that we would not be able to deal with those critical matters. They have had success in this area and doing a lot of their online educational courses, working in close coordination with the library department. So as you see, we have continued to work to ensure that we're making those adjustments as needed to take care of the services that we have to provide, and make sure that our employees have adjusted with us. It's all about communication. It's about building trust and making sure that we're doing that and our employees feel safe. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Eric Thompson to give him an opportunity to talk a little bit with you about some of the facility readiness that we've done. For those of you who've had an opportunity to be in the building within the last 30 days, you've probably noticed some things. And if there's anything that you've noticed that you want to make sure that we are addressing that may not necessarily be in our work plans right now, please bring that forward today, and we will continue to work through this process. So with this, I'll turn it over to Eric. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim, and good afternoon, Chairman Thomas and members of the committee. I'd like to actually start on slide 11. And as Kim mentioned, we've continued to make progress with respect to retrofitting the facilities, with the goal being to make the environment as safe as possible to help people feel comfortable about coming back to work or visitors to come back into our facilities to conduct city business. So while we recognize there's no silver bullet of a retrofit that might completely insulate us from the pandemic, we've taken some steps that we feel are going to be helpful as part of our toolkit. And once they're combined with personal responsibility of employees and our visitors, and adherence to social distancing and masking and hand hygiene protocols and all the other guidance that we get from our state and local and federal health authorities, we think we can safely continue on to phase 2. On slide 12, we give this chart gives you an update of the almost 4,000 specific retrofits that we've identified through the end of July, that as of last Friday, about 68% of those items have been completed. And staff and contractors continue every day to make more progress on that. Slide 13, we give a different depiction of the same information. We've got 10 categories of general retrofits that are represented here. And on a percentage basis, the soap dispensers and paper towel dispensers seem to lag behind the others. And that's primarily due to lead times associated with procuring those items. This is a growing list of items. So as departments continue to make progress on their individual assessments of their workspaces and offices, they make those requests to us, and then we get them processed to be completed as soon as we can. Slide 14 provided a few examples of some completed work, primarily in restrooms at some of our rec centers and libraries. As the previous charts indicated, hundreds of urinals and sink faucets, toilets, and water fountains have been replaced. And I walked by one of the water fountains just the other day that has a counter that shows that almost 400 plastic bottles, equivalents of water, have been dispensed from that. And that's without having full staff in the building. So I think last count shows that we've completed about almost 240 of these. So in addition to making things touch-free and safer in the current environment, you know, we also have a secondary environmental benefit as well. Slide 15 focuses a little more on City Hall. You may recall that back in the June briefing, we talked about having a designated public entrance on the surface level of City Hall. So we've installed this awning that's shown here in the top picture. We've also made adjustments to visitor parking in the garage. We've actually relocated visitor parking closer to the auditorium and provided new handicap and normal visitor parking literally right outside that door. So the lower picture shows some of the newer striping for the accessible spaces. There's also a ramp closer to the building so that visitors who may have challenges won't have to try to negotiate the 3 steps it takes to get from sidewalk level to the door. Slide 16 really focuses on the whole area of HVAC. As mentioned back in June, there are a lot of technologies out and a lot of marketing being spent on proven and not so proven technologies that claim to have all kinds of efficacy when it comes to dealing with COVID-19. So we have staff continuing to perform due diligence and looking into different technologies. We have some already underway. We're looking at HVAC duct cleaning in general, not as a new technology, but that's underway and will continue likely through the rest of calendar 2020. City Hall is nearing completion. Central Library is a few weeks behind. Jack Evans Police Headquarters will be one of the next is underway. The Oak Cliff Municipal Center, duct cleaning is actually complete there. The Ridgewood Belcher Recreation Center, duct cleaning is complete, and we're also doing an ultraviolet lamp installation there as well as part of some other work that we were able to kind of combine to add the scope to it. We have an agenda item either late September or the first agenda meeting in October that will address a couple hundred other city facilities with various technologies ranging from ultraviolet lamps to likely bipolar ionization and some advanced filtering technology systems as well. And the plan would be that through the end of this year and possibly in the first few months of 2021, we would address another couple hundred buildings from an HVAC perspective. Slide 17 summarizes some of the highlights related to additional cleaning and sanitizing that we want to make sure we provide. And this is all part of, again, helping people feel more comfortable returning to city facilities. We've ordered a lot of equipment and supplies. We've provided sanitation or sanitizing kits for just about every office and department. And that was, a picture on the left kind of was one of our assembly lines to kind of assemble these kits that were later distributed to the departments in their offices. So we wanted to make sure that as we talk a lot about personal responsibility and how everyone has to do their part, we wanted to make sure that each office had supplies readily available so that employees might easily be able to take care of making sure that their personal workspace is sanitized on a regular basis. In addition, we've got a monthly fogging schedule developed and underway to have a deeper disinfecting cleaning that will happen initially monthly, but then we're looking to also be able to adjust that frequency as the occupant loads increase and more employees come back to buildings, more citizens come to visit buildings. Slide 18 is the couple things I've kind of mentioned a little bit of this already, but our staff hasn't been immune from COVID-19, just like no one else has been. So we've had to remain flexible, and then sometimes that means that we end up having to contract a little bit more of the work than we would have preferred to. But we're committed to making sure that we can get all the retrofits done that we can in order to help people feel safe again to come back. As mentioned earlier, in this current environment, we've experienced a lot of extended lead times for different products and equipment, and delays on ordering items because everything that we're looking for, just about everyone else is as well. So we really are appreciative of the Office of Procurement Services and their team for being helpful in making multiple vendors available to us so that we can have more than one source to procure many of these items. Just a couple of examples on the bottom of that slide. Soap dispensers were, and they still are, in very high demand, significantly extended lead times. We had an order that we placed back in May for 300, and they just showed up about 2 weeks ago. Just as one example of how things that we could have gotten, within less than 2 weeks, 6 months or 8 months ago, now might take 3 to 4 months. But we're also monitoring the communications that come out from the Environmental Protection Agency related to primarily hand sanitizer products that don't meet standards or that are being recalled or pulled off shelves. So far, we haven't had any issues with any of the products that the city has purchased, but that's something that we wanted to make sure that we made you aware that we're monitoring. And then because of this current market, we won't always have the same brand of certain products like hand sanitizer or the disinfecting wipes. And that's just a function of the current market. Even though the city is a fairly large buyer or customer, that still won't guarantee that we'll always get, for example, Clorox wipes or Lysol disinfectant spray or Purell hand sanitizer. And then some of these products come with a slightly different scent or less perfume. So we notice and we get the feedback, but we want to remind everyone that in the current market, we're just not able to guarantee that we'll always have the same brand of all the material we get. And then finally on slide 19, This is a little photo of clear acrylic dividers that we've sourced for the council chamber in preparation for potential council meetings to resume there next month. I looked at this picture about 5 or 6 times, and then I finally said, "Oh, okay, yeah, it's there." But they're pretty clear. But the whole intent is to make sure that we can provide council some protection as well as you're reassembling once the decision is made to resume these meetings. So with that, I'll turn it back to Kim for closing.
Thank you. Thank you, Eric. So we've continued to review information to see the best possible situation as it relates to remaining, staying in the phase 1, which we are still in right now, and move into phase 2 and phase 3. As I mentioned, right now we're looking beyond the Labor Day holiday before we would begin to make any additional reopening plans. We definitely want to, again, maintain flexibility. And so with that, I'm just going to go to the very next steps, and then we will open it up for questions from the committee. So in this last slide, we will continue. We've been working very closely. We've had meetings, conversations. Our executive team met with both Dallas County and with the Dallas County Executive Leadership Team, as well as DISD recently. And so we are talking and sharing information about our efforts, ensuring that we understand kind of what all of us are doing. The city manager has continued to send weekly messages that I hope you've also had an opportunity to read to our employees that we send out every week, where we're just kind of giving them updates on things that are going on to keep them involved and keep them informed. We've also continued to communicate even with our family members who were furloughed earlier in the summer. And so as we continue to assess needs, technology is key. We know that that is something that we have to continue to look at. So as we engage in these manners going forward from a virtual standpoint, that our technologies will be conducive to those virtual environments. With that, we continue to remain transparent, and we hope that today, giving you an idea of kind of where we are, hopefully answered some of the questions that I know that many of you have had, but at this time, we look forward to entertaining any additional questions. Thank you so much.
Right. Thank you, Kim and team. This time we're going to start with Council Member Resendez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple of questions. And I'm looking at page 4 of the guidelines. And so I'm wondering if nothing changes from here until September 8th, will we still move into phase 2? Is that the plan right now?
The plan would be that I know the governor's declaration extension right now, I think is through September the 7th. And please correct me if I have that date wrong. I think John is still on the line. And so what we would do if we are still not, the tracking of the numbers, if things are still not where they're looking like that downward spiral is going to continue within those consistent days, we will come back again and we will continue to make those adjustments. And so that's why we continue to talk about the dates from a tentative standpoint. So we never get ahead of ourselves to where it looks like we just have to do it because we put the date out there. So to answer your question, I think we will just remain flexible. We will come back and update and share with the council if we start looking like things are not getting better. And we're not seeing the trends that we need to see. We will definitely not move forward with phase 2.
Okay, and that's kind of what I wanted to hear. Just want to be sure. I know all of us want to get back to as normal of a schedule as we, as possible, including myself. I want to get back to business as usual, but obviously the pandemic is still going on, and I want to be sure that those guidelines aren't just being shown just to show them. If we're going to abide by them, then we need to abide by them. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty much all I have. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
All right. Councilmember Atkins. See if he's still with us. Councilmember Atkins. All right, we'll come back to him. Councilmember, let's see, Gates.
Thank you. Kim, I had a question on, so if we do go back to meeting, around the horseshoe, and then if somebody, can't be present because they've potentially been exposed, they're in quarantine, or they have COVID, or for some reason, is there an ability then for that person to be able to log in remotely? And I know right now it's like we all kind of, in the beginning, it was like we all needed to be remotely or we all needed to be in the room together. So how would we be able to mitigate that going forward?
Thank you, Councilwoman Gates. You're reading my mind. That is actually a conversation that I had earlier today with the city attorney's office. And so they're actually going to send something that will kind of help us. But it's my understanding that if we wanted to have a hybrid where certain council members that elected to, in the very beginning, to not have to feel that they have to come to the building, we could still offer the virtual platform to where we would still be able to hold the meetings, some members in the building, and maybe that's the best way to start. And then we would have some that are not in the building. It would still give us an opportunity to gradually bring back our elected leadership into the building, since we know that not everyone may, for whatever reasons, whether it's underlying health conditions,
right.
Or yeah, we want to make sure that we can maintain that flexibility. And it's my understanding that that is something that we should be able to work through. I don't want to answer for the attorneys, but I did ask that question earlier. I don't know if Tammy Palomini is on the call.
I am, Kim.
Oh, good.
Good afternoon.
So Tammy, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. Thank you.
No, that's okay. That's okay. So the governor did suspend some of the Open Meeting Act requirements as it relates to video conferencing. So we could still have some of you virtual and some at City Hall.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Mendelson.
Oh, thank you. Well, I just want to start off with a thank you to Kim and Eric and all of the team at City Hall. I think you've done a really good job of pivoting. We pivoted for a short time and then we started thinking bigger. But I think that, especially in thinking about how we deliver services remotely and virtually and differently, so that people can access them, I think you've done a really good job. And thank you for highlighting some of those departments. I think you missed some, though. I think you missed transportation, which has still gone out and done a lot of work in the community without missing a beat, as far as I could see. Office of Homeless Solutions, frankly, has gotten more accomplished during COVID than we ever did before. So I just want to call them out and say thank you. And then the Parks Department, who's been so incredibly flexible with ever-changing items. I just think they also need sort of a shout out. So I just want to start with that. In some of the specifics, thanks for including some of the pictures about the restrooms. I wanted to ask about the doors for the restrooms. Is there any kind of thought that's been given to that?
Yes, sorry about that. I actually didn't include one of those pictures, but we've installed some Stephen Pool. It's a trade brand name, but it's basically a bracket that allows you to open the door without touching it. That was one of the retrofits that we could get done without a lot of expense dealing with electrical wiring, and it's a little more complex to go to a fully automated door. We are doing some automated doors as well, primarily on building exteriors going into a library, into a rec center. But for restrooms inside a building, we've so far only dealt with the step and pull brackets. And I can get you I can send you a photo of one of those.
I'd love to see it, but I think a lot of women, we have very often used paper towels to open up the handles, and then sometimes not had a trash can nearby to dispose of the paper towel, but this is a way better option. Thank you. The awning you were showing on City Hall, is that facing north or is that facing east?
It's on the, it's looking at the building from the east. So the blue lobby, if you frequent that side of the building, that's Hervey
So
Street.
over by the water department.
Yes.
Right.
Great, thank you. Okay, and then I want to talk about the council meetings a little bit. One of the things you just said, Kim, was that, well, possibly council members could be in their office instead of sitting around the horseshoe. But what are you going to do if somebody needs to quarantine? Maybe someone in their household is positive, something like that.
I think it'll go back to, thank you, Councilwoman Middleton. I think that what we would do is in any situation like that, where we would not penalize the council members for not being physically in the building. And I think that's the reason why we want to work through and see what could possibly be those options that we could give council members, especially if you've traveled somewhere and you just want to do some precautions about not being around even your staff. So I think there's flexibility that we're going to need to make sure that we're working through, so council members don't feel like they just have to be in their office or they just have to be in the council chambers and still be able to participate and take care of the business at hand. But that's a great question, and we will definitely work through it and make sure that those options are available.
So I'm guessing that I'm talking to you right now on a WebEx monitor. I'm on that as well.
Yes. Yes,
and
ma'am.
The problem is you can only see me and 4 other people, right? So a lot of other platforms, you can see everybody at the meeting who's logged in. And I will say that I would find that to be very helpful. And I don't know if that's something we can get changed or upgraded or whatever, but our faces say so much, as I have found out, sometimes good and sometimes bad. But
okay,
when we're trying to build consensus for something or understand if somebody really has a question or they get it and just be quiet already, I think that would be helpful. Don't laugh at that. See, I can see your face right now. Anyhow, my other question is, you were showing a picture of the council chambers with the dividers, but I was wondering about the briefing room, or if we're just not going to use that.
Our recommendation, and I don't want to speak for Eric, Councilman Middleton, but thank you so much for bringing that up. We don't believe that the current arrangement of that particular room will really allow for us to really get to being able to have meetings in there. It's going to be very difficult. It would be a situation where you could only have so many council members even around because of the way it's configured, and the room is it's small, to be honest with you. So right now, our recommendation is that meetings of the council, whether it's briefing meeting or city council meeting, would need to be held in the chamber, based on where we are with the building. We are recommending that if we start looking at boards and commissions, that maybe that just becomes the room for board and commission meetings. Oftentimes they're not having 20 staff people in the back or whatever, but we don't believe that room is going to allow us or meet the needs that we're going to have going forward for the full city council.
I would agree.
Thanks. Councilmember, this is Tammy. If I can just remind everyone that also the Open Meetings Act does allow for you to be virtual, so you don't have to be at City Hall. So that will still continue to be a possibility if there's a quarantine issue.
Great. And thank you, Tammy, Councilman Middleton. So I think it goes back to, again, we want to make sure that we look at the different needs of council members. We may have council members that say, I'm just going to volunteer to do virtual right now until such time that I feel comfortable. I've already had some council members to say, I see about my elderly mother, or, I've got my own conditions or whatever. So we are definitely going to make sure we'll work with Carrie Rogers-Price, our director of the council office, to make sure that we're getting those special needs, and we'll definitely take care of the council. We want you all to feel safe, and we want you to feel comfortable being in the building.
Well, thank you. My last comment, I guess, is that while I have already praised you for how quickly you've responded to the needs of our residents in sort of rethinking how you could still deliver them, whether it's curbside or virtual, I would encourage you to continue to rethink why you're doing it in the first place and what actually has to be collected. What I'm sometimes seeing is that we're just taking a system that was developed in 1950 that probably needed to be updated anyhow, and now we're implementing that same system but virtually, instead of thinking, well, what do we actually need to be collecting in terms of data? What do we actually need to do, and what's the best way to do it? And so I'm just going to encourage you to use this time to also rethink how the whole process works for every service that we deliver. And again, thank you for the incredible work that really all of the staff at City Hall has done to be able to not miss a beat for most things. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Let's see. Trying to think, I know Councilmember Narvaez had to leave early. Councilmember, let's see if Councilmember Atkins is back with us. Councilman Atkins.
I'll hear everything great, Kim. Great presentation. You know, but my deal is that Mr. Thompson over here in my community office, man, I know my people want to get back to work, but I don't know when would they be able to get back to work. But we're gonna make everything work good, and great presentation, Kim, and I know we're doing everything we can, but the kids to make sure everybody's safe. That's number one. We got to be safe, and we look at 311. You know, we got all those people out because of COVID-19, and we shorthanded, and that's the bad problem when we have staff that cannot go to work. So we got to make sure those staff is safe at home so they can perform the duty and keep the city open. Because if everybody's sick, the city is closed and we can't do our job. So thank you for doing whatever we can do to make sure our employees safe, number one, so they can work.
Thank you.
Thank
you, sir.
All right. Anyone need a round two? All right. All right.
Chair, can I ask one more question?
Yeah, sure.
If in-person council meetings continue, whether it's hybrid or in person, how would the community be allowed to be engaged?
Looking at several options, Councilmember Resendez, thank you for that question. Or maybe we set up a place where if those residents that want to address the council in person versus through the virtual platform that I know we're doing now, where we have speakers sign up and then they can dial in and participate in the meeting. It may be something where we do it where we have so many, we spread them out in the chambers to where it's only so many seats. I know we've had a couple of sessions that we've had in the chambers that have been for our employees, and we did seat assignments where we put so many seats in between and blocked out the ones that they could not sit in. We could do something similar to that for those residents who want to come in person versus doing it on the virtual. I think we would offer both. And that way, those that have the capacity to be in the building, or we do the social distancing in the chambers, we would do that. Those that would rather be on the call. So we would probably have the same flexible type of arrangement with those residents wanting to speak, the same way we would have for council members. Does that make sense? Did I answer your question?
You answered it perfectly. Thank you so much. It sounds like you all are being thoughtful and thorough. So please continue the good work. Thank you for this great presentation.
Thank you, sir.
Can I piggyback on that?
Sure.
Sure. So the only thing I want to say is that it may be that you can consider also having virtual stations that people could go to, meaning perhaps their internet is not secure, or they don't have internet or the right devices, and maybe they can go to 3 different libraries or 5 different whatever's, a rec center if they're open, and there can be a WebEx monitor right there for them to come. And they could even, you know, register for, I want to go to the, you know, Highland Hills Rec Center. I want to go to a library. And we have 5 people lined up at there who can then just come sit in the seat, do their presentation, and then move on. So I just want to say that I do think that there's still that digital issue that we see kind of every week. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Middleton, and that is a great suggestion. We will definitely explore that. And hopefully between now and the time that before we get to that September timeframe, we will have something fully worked out. We want to make sure that we are being accessible to the public and it relieve as much of the tension as possible for them being able to participate. So thank you for that suggestion. I appreciate that.
All right. Now we're ready for our last presentation. And if any council members have focus area reports, we'll do those right after. See if we can try and finish this up in the next 20 minutes or so.
So, Councilmember Thomas, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity. I have provided an update for the committee this afternoon. I don't see it on the screen just yet. I don't really have a lot of new information from what we've previously provided to you. This just simply represents an update on the 311 calls that we've received, as well as the code enforcement complaint and investigations. As you can, do we have the presentations that we can put up on the screen for the council members to see? Well, if not, let me just say that right now, since March 13th, we've received about 9,000, just over 9,000 total resident calls to our 311 Operations Center. We're continuing to see those calls drop each week. We started with an average calls of about 1,200 per week, and we're down to about 116 per week. As it relates to code enforcement and their activity, they have initiated about 15,000 proactive cases as it relates to investigations, and as it relates to their proactive education for businesses. That topic came up earlier as it relates to the way and manner in which we're providing updates on the governor's orders. I did mention, and I want to draw your attention again to the City of Dallas's website for COVID-19. It's dallascityhall.com/COVID. And that is a great opportunity for anyone who may be listening to be able to see the latest information as it relates to those updates. And so we'll continue our efforts. A lot of it is very proactive at this point, trying to ensure that businesses and our residents are aware of the current status of orders. Our enforcement activity has been very minimal up to this point, and as it relates to actually having to write citations. And with that, council member and committee, I'll be happy to address any questions.
All right, thank you very much, John, for that update. We'll start with Councilmember Resendez.
Questions?
All right. Councilmember Atkins. All right, we'll come back to him. Councilmember Blewett. Councilmember Gates.
Questions right now.
Councilmember Middleton.
And I'm going to round it out with no questions either. How do you like that?
All right, all right. I see Councilmember Atkins is back. Councilmember Atkins, did you have any questions?
No question. It's great.
Excellent. Well, thank you, John. I know that don't happen often. You better take it and run with it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right. Colleagues, we have any updates from your area of focus? I know you're working very hard. We focused a lot around the budget, but at the same time, I know some of these areas that you've been working in as well. So I'll give you a minute to see if you have any area of focus updates. All right. Hearing none. It is now 3:44. I want to thank you for your focus. Councilman, I can just mute that, and you'll be able to talk all you want in just a minute. It's 3:45 now, colleagues. I thank you for your commitment to this committee. We will be meeting every 2 weeks. That way we can have some consistency. Every 2 weeks at 1:30 on Thursday. Thank you and have a good afternoon. Meeting adjourned.